Yeah, yeah. Well, welcome everyone. We're glad you're here today. My name is Tyler Amundsen. I'm the Executive Director at Big Sky Senior Services here in Billings. We do work to prevent elder abuse and exploitation, and we're really glad to have you all here in the room today to hear about how fraud is impacting folks in our community, to learn a little bit more from the experts that we have with us today, and hopefully walk out of here with at least one or two things that you think you can do to either help a neighbor or help our community take on fraud and financial exploitation of our older adults in our community. Along with me is Nancy Anderson, our outreach coordinator for AARP, who's been our helping sponsor this event today. So let's give them a round of applause. And Nancy has been working diligently to get the schedule put together and make all this happen, and so we're glad to have this happen today to make this all possible. Our goal really is that you have something you walk out of this room with. So with that, today's schedule looks a little bit this way. We're going to first have an individual share a survivor story, someone who's survived financial fraud and elder exploitation. We'll then hear a little bit more from AARP about some of the great resources we've got available to help us learn about what's happening for folks, and then also support our community in building better networks. And then lastly, we'll have a panel discussion with some experts on financial fraud and exploitation who can share with us some insights on what we might want to watch out for in our community. And with all of that, I'm going to invite Nancy to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Tyler. I'm so excited. Jessica Billings is a combination of both our speakers coming up soon. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little rummy. Susan Billings is a fraud survivor, and she had an extensive amount of money stolen from her by a scammer. And I think her story will touch you. She's been very courageous. She decided that she wanted to make lemonade out of lemons. And so she has just set her mind to coming forward and sharing her story in hopes that it can help others avoid becoming a victim of fraud. So with that, Susan, I'm going to ask her to take a seat because she's getting ready for knee surgery. So, Susan Billings.
Well, thank you, Nancy, for inviting me. And it's hard to talk about what happened to me, but I do try to get the word out to people so that hopefully it won't happen to them. My situation started in May of 2022, and I noticed a couple of charges on my Amazon account that I had not made. So I had contacted Amazon and went through the dispute forms and got my money back. It was about $500. And they had recommended that I change my account information, my billing information. I had been using a debit card, and they said credit card was better to use. So I changed that information and thought everything was done and no problem. Well, a couple of weeks after I got my money back, I got a phone call, came up on my cell phone from Amazon. And the lady that was on the other end said that they had noticed there was some activity on my Amazon account again, and they knew I had had problems a few weeks previous, and they wanted to know were these charges from that I had made, and I said no, those were not, and at this time it was $6,000 of charges. So she said, well, it's obvious somebody has your information and we need to transfer you to someone that can help you investigate this. So she transferred me to someone from the Federal Trade Commission, and the gentleman took the information, gave me a case file number, and said that he would be transferring it to the DEA to have someone start an investigation. So at that point, I was transferred over to a Randall Jenkins, supposedly from DEA. And I gave him the information of what I had heard and knew about what was going on, and he said he would open up an investigation. He gave me his cell phone number so that he would know or I would know he was calling me back. And I said to him, how do I know you're who you say you are? And he sent me a text message with a copy of his photo ID and badge number. So I thought, okay, I'm dealing with a legitimate person. So at first, he called me a couple of days later and said that he had pulled up my name, and my name was being used to open several bank accounts and credit cards across the country, and that I was under suspicion of being part of a money laundering scheme, and that they would investigate, but that I was not to tell anybody because you don't know who you can trust. And they would issue a warrant for my arrest if I, did any reporting or talking about this and whatnot. And he kept wanting more information about where I was, what I was doing. He was able to track me. If I left town, I'm from Anaconda, and if I left town, he'd say, where are you? What are you doing? Where are you going? I was supposed to contact him several times a day to let him know what I was doing, if I was going into Butte or something. And if I didn't, he'd call me or text me and say, where are you? You left the area. And so I was just terrified that, first of all, that my name was being used in these accounts, and that second of all, I was going to get arrested at any moment. I did not tell anybody that this was going on. And so this went on for a couple of weeks. And then he came back, and he was very accusatory and very suspicious of me. And then when he came back on, he said, well, good news, we've determined that you're not part of this money laundering scam, but there are criminals out there that have your information, and they are going to be after your money, so we need to protect your money. So he first had me go to my bank and take out all of my cash out of my savings account and go to Walmart and wire transfer, and they were going to open up a secure locker, U.S. Treasury secure locker, to put my money in that would be protected. And then I would get a cashier's check back of the amount of money that I had transferred in. And I was to send, when I got to Walmart, he would send me a code, a barcode that I was to use for these $5,000 increments of money for MoneyGrams that were to go into this secured locker. So I did that, and then he sent me a copy of the cashier's check of the amount of money that I had deposited to verify that they had it. And then he said, well, you have money in a retirement fund. And I said, yes. And he said, okay, well, you need to save that money, so you need to contact your in retirement institution and have them wire transfer your money to you, to the bank account, and then that they were setting up an account for me to wire transfer that money in. At no point did I give him any of my information. He knew my date of birth, my social security number, my address, the fact that I had lived in California at one time, that I had a quilting business. He knew all of that. So I thought, well, he's a government person, he would have access to that information. So, but there were times when I really thought, this just doesn't sound right. I just don't know that, I should be doing this. And I even would challenge him, and he'd say, okay, fine. He said, I'll issue a warrant for your arrest, and we'll just come and arrest you, and then you can, pay lawyer fees and figure out what to do. So I backed down and, okay, well, I'll do this. And when the cashier's checks, he would send me the cashier's checks, he would, I thought, okay, well, that's money in there. It looked like a legitimate cashier's check, U.S. Treasury cashier's check. So anyway, long story short, this went on for 8 weeks, and then once he had all of my money, of course, Randall Jenkins disappeared. and I was left without any money. And at that point, I realized that I had been scammed, and so I was so embarrassed and so ashamed, and I didn't even want to tell anybody. And I just, what am I going to do? I knew not having any money, I would not be able to support myself to the lifestyle that I had become accustomed to. I had bought a beautiful Victorian home when I first moved to Montana upon retirement. But I knew living on my Social Security income, I would not be able to support that. And I did a lot of traveling in my retirement, and I knew that was going to have to stop. So I realized I was going to have to sell my house and get something smaller. And at that point, I knew I was going to have to start telling people, because they knew how much I loved my house. They were going to question why I was suddenly putting that house up for sale and changing things in my life. So I told my son first and daughter-in-law, and then started with friends that I had in the area, and then eventually more family and whatnot out of the area. And I was very fortunate that I never had any family or friends that criticized me for falling for this scam. They were supportive. They were felt really sorry that this had happened to me. They encouraged me that they were scammers, that it wasn't anything that I could have prevented, and for me not to feel so bad about it. But I still felt terrible. I just, my life was just turned upside down, and I was so upset, and had some periods of being depressed and trying to deal with what was going to happen. So I had to sell my house, and I went from 2,500 square feet down to 550 square feet house, and trying to figure out how I was going to keep everything, and what I wanted to keep and what I needed to keep and whatnot. And so I got that done, and then I was just dealing with this horrible feeling of, gosh, this is horrible to happen, and what could I do to make something good out of this? I've always been an optimistic person, and so I just felt that I needed to start telling people. And besides my immediate family and friends, I first did a presentation at my church, and then the local newspaper in Anaconda wrote a story about it. And then NBC Montana picked up on it in Missoula, and came and interviewed me and did a report on that. And then from there, different people came and said, please come and talk to us here and talk to us there. And then I met Nancy, and she asked me to be an AARP volunteer. And so I've been able to go to lots of presentations and lots of discussions and town halls. And last year at the Governor's Conference on Aging, Paul and I were a keynote on that. And then I even was able to go to Washington, D.C. in August to be a part of the Fraud Network, Watch Network there. And so I feel fortunate that I'm able to get the word out to people and to talk to people about my experience, and to put a name and a face together to know that it can happen to anybody, that you shouldn't feel ashamed and embarrassed. Because these scammers are so sophisticated. And I say all the time, if they had spent as much time doing a legitimate job instead of scamming all of us. But I have since learned a lot of things. At that time it happened, I had no idea where to go, who to report it to. I had no idea AARP had the resources that they do. When I first realized that this had happened, I went to my credit union to begin with, and they said, you need to go report this to law enforcement. So I did local law enforcement, who then referred me to FBI, and unfortunately I got no response from the FBI, the local FBI agents. They just never returned my call. I'd leave messages, and I'd get, the secretary would call me, would say, well, the agent doesn't have time to talk to you. There's nothing he can do. You sent the money. away. There's just nothing they can do. So in other words, quit bugging them. And so at that point, I did, the local law enforcement did have me fill out a Federal Trade Commission report, so I did that. And then I started doing some investigation of who and what was out there, resources and whatnot. And then I kind of developed my own little scenario of when I told my story and I visited my sister in California and did a presentation 2 or 3 times there, and my brother in Idaho 2 or 3 times, or 1 time there. And so I've been kind of, going out and just letting people know. And I've done a lot of investigation on the resources, and of course when you're with AARP, you get beautiful resources some of them are over there, that you can hand out. And so my whole focus is trying to get people aware of what resources are out there, and what things to look for. I have found, since this all started, had I gone into to the 3 credit bureaus that have all your information out there, had I gone in and looked to see was my name being used opening up accounts, I would have found that no, my name had not been being used, and I could have stopped it right there, but I didn't know about that. Then I have found out that you can put a security freeze and a fraud watch on your credit cards and your credit bureaus. So I tell people, go and do that. Go in and put security freeze so that they can't use your name to open up these accounts. And it's fast and easy to do. If you do need to have a credit check, that you can open it up and have it done and then lock it back up again. And check your credit reports all the time. I did find out Amazon never calls you, so if you get a phone call from Amazon, hang up, don't answer it because they don't call you. And government agents do not send you copies of their badge and photo IDs. So if you think that is gonna, justify what they sent, no, it's not that at all. So those are some things that I have found and I tell people about. And I just got to keep getting the word out there. And I just thank you so much for the opportunity to come and share. And I look forward to continuing to work with the AARP.
Thank you, Susan. Doesn't that really put a face on fraud? I mean, I've worked in the fraud area for about 10 years. And I always knew it was a terrible thing, but the human element didn't come through to me until I met Susan. And so I think that's really important that AARP can help her to shine a spotlight on that terrible crime, and it is a crime. So our next speaker, I'm happy to introduce a colleague of mine from our national AARP office. Jessica Prell is with the Fraud Watch Network, and she's going to tell you about some of our resources that you might not have realized. And all of AARP's resources are available to anyone of any age, whether or not you're an AARP member. So as she goes through this, know that they're available to you.
Okay, we were having technology issues earlier, but it looks like it's resolved. Thanks everybody for coming out today. I think it's important that everybody's here so we can educate ourselves and our loved ones about how to stop and spot these kinds of scams. I want to talk to you a little bit today about a social mission project that we have at AARP called the Fraud Watch Network. And our goal is really to get in front of our core audience, so our members, those 50 plus, but we know fraud impacts everyone, so this message is important for everyone, to help them understand the significant risk that fraud presents to their financial security. We also have a really wholesome services to support victims, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then I have some very smart colleagues on the national and state level who advocate for laws to strengthen protections to help people before they lose money and resources to support victims of fraud. So I work on the fraud prevention side and just want to give you an overview of some of the communication methods that we have in order to spread these messages with our members and others. So we have a really robust website at ARP that has over 70 different tip sheets that outline the different types of scams, how they work. Many of these include videos that walk you through the type of scam. We also send out bi-weekly watchdog alerts that you can sign up to receive via email or text, and these come from my director, and they talk about scams that are happening now and how they work, what you need to know, and what you can do to protect yourselves and your loved ones. One of the recent ones we had, which was about tollway scams, which is something that kind of bubbled up recently this year, where you're traveling maybe and you get a notification on your phone that you have a missed toll payment, and you pay that over your phone, but really it's just a phishing website that's designed to steal your money and information. So those are the types of things that we like to alert people about. In addition to the watchdog alerts, we have a scam tracking map that you can go to see and report scam in your local area. We also have an award-winning podcast, if you're a podcast listener, called The Perfect Scam. And it really goes into details about scams from the victim perspective as well as law enforcement. And Susan's story was featured on one of our Perfect Scam episodes, so encourage you to check that out. We also have really great publications at ARP. How many people get the ARP magazine or the bulletin? And I'm sure you've seen some of our fraud features in there before. So that's a really important outreach for us to reach our 38 million members. We also have a Facebook page called the ARP Fraud Watch Network, and on there we do regular Facebook Lives with our national partners. So the Federal Trade Commission, the United States Postal Inspection Service, just to name a few. We also live stream webinars that we do throughout the year on that page, as well as teletown halls. So we call our members in their homes to talk about these kind of things that are happening, and we have experts on the line to answer all their questions. And then last but not least, we certainly couldn't do what we do without all the amazing work that happens here on the ground level. So through our ARP Montana State Office, led by Nancy, and with all the great volunteers here today. And so that work's really important, and working with community partners to put on events like we're at. I want to talk now about our victim support services. So we have a Fraud Watch Network helpline that anybody could call. As Nancy mentioned, these resources available to anybody. You don't have to be a member, regardless of age. And you can call this number if you've encountered something and you're not sure if it's a scam or not, but you want a second opinion. You can call if you've been the victim of a scam and you're looking for some support and direction on what to do next. They can walk you through the process of reporting the scam and who to reach out to for additional help and support. We also have family members call who might be concerned about a loved one, or we have family members call with their loved one. I have a colleague who doesn't work in fraud, but knows about this research, and when her mom called her, excited that she had just won a popular sweepstakes and just needed to pay the advanced fee in order to collect her winnings, her mom said, "Oh, wait a minute, I think I read about this in the ARP magazine. We can call the Fraud Watch Network helpline and talk to somebody," and they did that. And on the other line, they were able to get that, kind of third-party, non-judgmental person who says, "I'm so sorry this happened, but yes, this is a scam that we hear about quite frequently." And so I think it's a powerful tool for a lot of people to be able to use, and a resource I'm glad you all know about, and please share with others. And we also know, as Susan indicated, that the emotional impact of fraud is equally, if not more, devastating than the financial impact. So a couple years ago, we developed our Fraud Watch Network support group, and this is an online peer-facilitated support group that, again, anybody can join to share their experience in a safe space and know that they're not alone, and to feel empowered to tell their story. Perhaps some of them haven't even told anybody outside of the support group before. Some of them come for one session, some of them have been coming with us weekly for over a year. So it's really there to support people where they're at and how they need it. But we see people coming out of it knowing they're not alone and knowing that this was not their fault. I want to talk a little bit too about this initiative we have to change the way that we talk and think about fraud victimization here in the United States. And we really believe that this is something we need to change to have fundamental impact on the fraud crisis that we're currently experiencing. So we noticed through our helpline and talking with the people that are in our support groups that when people call in, they often use language that indicates that they are to blame for the crime that they experienced. I got duped, I can't believe I fell for this, how could I be so stupid? And we hear families express those sentiments as well when they call in. And so we did some research. We wanted to look into, is this happening as broadly as we suspect? If it is happening, why is it happening? And are there examples in the US where we have changed the narrative on things before for societal good? And going into this, we knew that when crime or property crimes, violent or property crimes happen here in the United States, we respond with empathy and support. What can I do? That's awful that happened to them. But when somebody experiences a financial crime, oftentimes the responses are much different. And instead, we lay blame at the feet of those victims. And we see it in the headlines as well. So these often tend to focus on someone doing something wrong, somebody who let their guard down, who wasn't savvy, tech savvy, who got duped, who got scammed, who had a senior moment. And then as I indicated earlier, victims themselves, and Susan shared sentiments of this, expressing feelings of shame and embarrassment and self-blame. And the negative impact of all of this is that victims are reluctant and don't come forward to tell their stories, as Susan has so bravely done, and don't report it to law enforcement, so that we don't really understand the true impact and the true scale of this fraud epidemic that we're experiencing. So to counteract these societal norms, we want to create an environment in which fraud victims feel supported and not judged. And in this research, we found, and we have a long paper on this that's on our website I can connect you to, but the gist of it is we found that yes, we tend to blame, but it's not really what we mean. It's less about feeling that way, and it's just about societal norm and using the language and practices that come from it. So we know that it's rooted in cultural values and driven by issues that we can address. So how do we address that? And we believe that we can all move forward, starting with flipping the narrative and how we talk about fraud victimization. What if we said, falling victim is not your fault. It's the fault of the criminal who perpetrated the crime. I am so sorry that this happened to you. We have the power to reframe that context with our words. So instead of using words that imply that blame and shame that victims automatically feel, we don't need to tell them that. Why not show empathy and empower them to do something about it, to take action and to report it? We ran across a paper that was in the Atlantic magazine back in 2016, but it had a powerful point, and it was talking about victims of all crimes in general. And when the perpetrator is the subject of the sentence, participants' rating of victim blaming and victim responsibility went down significantly. So that tells us that if we change how we're talking about this, that can have a real impact. And instead of talking about, granny scammed and lottery scam, why not talk about it from the perspective of organized crime, the only true winners in the lottery scam? We suggest that would still garner just as many readers, and people would be more interested in reading that than focusing on the fraud victim. So I want to share with you this really powerful video that I think does a better job of illustrating what I've just shared with you all about how important it is to use our words with intention.
$8.8 billion left our economy to fraud last year.
I had lost everything.
It is at its highest level ever recorded.
I was being scammed by my caretaker. I was embarrassed. I was afraid. I was ashamed of myself that the young kids would have to look up to me and say, look what happened to her.
So often we hear heartbreaking statements from victims.
My world felt like it was falling apart. I felt helpless.
I don't know how I could have been so stupid, but I was scammed. I haven't had a manic episode in 2 decades, and now I've been to the hospital twice.
How can I be so gullible?
I know better. I should know better. I feel like a real dummy.
Now I've lost all of our Lenny.
I blamed myself.
You know, I'm the person who failed my children and my grandchildren.
It's really important that fraud victims feel supported.
To change the way we think, to change the way we speak.
Talk about the person being tricked or duped or having fallen for something. We see this form of victim blaming in headlines regularly.
Let's be very careful about how we react to that story.
Woman tricked of $30,000.
I mean, for example, if we were to sit there in our armchair and go, how could somebody be that naive? How on earth could they be so stupid? That listener is now going to be thinking, well, gosh, I hope I never become a victim, because if I do, there's certainly no way I'm ever going to tell my story.
I stopped them, I talked to them, I explained to them that they had the wrong impression and the wrong idea of what goes on when a person gets scammed.
So instead of looking at it as, oh, I fell for this or I got suckered, no, I was human.
The words we use help them to feel supported and to want to come forward.
I'm finally feeling hopeful again. I really didn't think it was possible.
It's very important to me that people understand that this is not their fault.
The responsibility for fraud is on the bad guys.
Criminal, sophisticated gangs, that's what they're operating as.
It's not the people who they've manipulated to believe something that just isn't true.
I found out it's the criminal that's causing the problem, not me. I wasn't stupid.
I felt empowered.
Those words, when they're words of love and empathy and not blame, can do a lot. It can help the victim want to report and want to do something about it and feel empowered.
I am a lawyer, and now I'm going to use all my energy to make sure that these criminals are brought to justice.
Your words matter. All of our words matter. If you can use the language of empathy and support.
I realize now that it's not your fault. You were a victim.
It can save a life.
So I just want to remind us about how we can all play a part in this role. It begins with each of us. Please look closely at how you and others are talking about fraud victimization and change the words we use if needed. Emphasize that these are crimes and they are not the victim's fault. Use words that acknowledge the crime and the sophistication of the crime, of the criminal, and encourage victims to report to law enforcement. There was a research done by our partners at FINRA that found 47% of people don't report fraud because they don't think anything can be done. And we really need to encourage everybody to report fraud for a number of reasons. Number one is victim restitution. They might not be able to do anything now, but if there's ever a chance at victim restitution in the future for them, they need that piece of paper to say, hey, this happened to them. And we also need people to report fraud so that we can understand just how big the scourge is. For example, in 2022, the Federal Trade Commission put out its report that total fraud losses accounted for $9 billion. And when they considered unreported fraud, they found that it was actually probably closer to $137 billion stolen from people in the United States in 2022 alone. So this is an epidemic. We need to take action. We need a whole societal approach, and we really feel that changing the narrative is an important part of that process. So thank you all for being here today and letting me talk about these important issues. I want to leave you with a quote that's just, I think, sums up what we're talking about very well. And it says, if you care for something, you call it a flower. If you want to kill something, you call it a weed. So just a demonstration on how important words are and how much they matter. I just leave you with this quick recap of the ARP Fraud Watch resources. ARP.org/FraudWatch Network is our main page that links to everything I talked about today, so you don't have to frantically take notes or make sure you caption everything, but just know we're here to help. We have resources and we want to support you.
Okay, so now we're going to hear from a panel of experts. So if our panel could go ahead and come up here, please. Susan, Jessica, Paul, Chris, Brett.
Front and center. Give me fierce. I don't know what that is.
Well, let's just start with our panel. If you guys could introduce yourselves, kind of your area of expertise or work you do right now, and yeah, we'll just start with that. That sounds like a good way to go.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, my name is Brett Lapham. I have been with First Interstate Bank for about 2.5 years, but my experience prior to that was 23 years in law enforcement, and 15 of those years was spent as a financial crimes detective. So it's kind of been my wheelhouse for a long time. I was with Billings Police Department, and I was our liaison to Adult Protective Services, so worked an awful lot with them, and have been really excited to a couple of things with Al Ward with AARP. I think he snuck out on us, but he'll be around. And yeah, now excited to be working in the banking world. I work in the financial crimes division, and so kind of more of the same, looking for fraud, trying to help our customers, and see what we can do to stop this.
I'm Jessica Prell. As you heard before, so I'll keep this short, but I work with ARP on our fraud prevention team. I've been doing outreach and education with ARP for over 10 years, and my background is in social work. Before coming to ARP, I worked with the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Well, I'm Susan Bivens, and I'm a retired registered nurse. Born and raised in Northern California and retired 10 years ago and moved to Montana. I followed my son and daughter-in-law and granddaughter, so that's how I ended up in Montana.
Good afternoon. My name's Paul Greenwood. I was a career prosecutor with the San Diego District Attorney's Office for 25 years. That's where I picked up my accent, by the way. Southern California dude, you know. And of the 25 years, I spent 22 years prosecuting crimes committed against older adults. 65% of those crimes involve some kind of fraud, and tragically, many of those cases of fraud also ended up with the victim being sometimes physically harmed to the point of being murdered. Since I retired from that office, I've had the great fortune to work with AARP around the country on trying to share what I've learned in the courtroom with a different audience in the hope that we can help, again, just like Jessica's saying, and Susan's story, save people from going through that heartache.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Benson. I'm with the Montana Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigation, based out of Helena. I have been there for about 2 years. Prior to that, I had 22 years law enforcement, so 24 years altogether. A couple years in patrol, the rest of it investigations. Now doing elder justice cases throughout the state. involving exploitation of elders, abuse, and neglect.
Great. Chris, I'm going to have you pass the microphone back down there.
Okay.
So our first question for our panel is, and we'll provide time at the end for the audience to ask questions as well here. But Jessica and Brett, we'll start with both of you. What are some of the most common types of fraud that individuals should be aware of today?
Well, in the banking world, we see it all, and it's really hard to narrow it down. I will tell you just a few of the scams that I see almost on a daily basis, unfortunately. We see the romance or relationship scams, and these ones really bother me. I mean, for a lot of reasons, but not only are you have the person that is losing money, but they also believe that they're in a committed relationship. And these things can go on for a very long time. I've worked cases where somebody courted the victim for over a year before they ever asked for money. Well, if you've spent a year talking to somebody, FaceTiming, chatting on the phone, texting, writing letters, whatever, I mean, you're emotionally invested in that relationship, right? Whether it ends up being real or not at that time for you, it's incredibly real. And so when the scam breaks and they realize that this criminal has got their money and had been lying to them all along, those can be particularly devastating scams to deal with. Unfortunately, we still see those all the time. They get looped into all kinds of different types of scams, which I'm sure are going to come up here. But those relationship scams can be quite devastating and can be quite expensive. We see in that particular scam, people end up losing not $50 or $100, but tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in relationship scams. So I think that's one that we see that does a lot of damage. Another one I see very, very regularly is involving timeshares. If anybody owns a timeshare and you decide you want to sell that timeshare, or somebody out of the blue reaches out to you and says, hey, we know you have a timeshare in Mexico and we would like to purchase it from you, and they're offering you $300,000 on something that you spent $50,000 on, right? And all kinds of things get roped into these scams. They want advance fees, or they're saying that your property needs some repairs before it can be sold. Another huge red flag is they want the capital gains tax, right? We hear that all the time. Just a bit on that. I'm not an IRS agent, and I've never even played one on TV, so. But my research and training with that has been, you don't pay capital gains tax on a transaction until that transaction's already happened, right? But what these scammers will tell you is you got to pay it in advance. All this money's got to be paid in advance. So they will keep going and going and going, and then you're out of money eventually. What's another one we see all the time? A hot one that's coming up, tax season, all right? People are going to start getting those emails, those text messages, and everything from the IRS saying that you have past due taxes and you need to buy gift cards, or you need to, send a check or wire money or whatever, or cryptocurrency. I'm sure is going to come up. Crypto is a huge one now. You don't pay your IRS bill with cryptocurrency or with gift cards ever, right? But we see that one every single year. I've seen that since my early days in law enforcement. And so as we're heading into tax season, we will see that one ramp up. So there's three quick ones. I could talk for absolutely the rest of our time about all the other scams that are out there. But I think those are three that I see very common.
And at the Fraud Watch Network, our helpline, as I mentioned earlier, fields about 100,000 calls a year, so 500 calls a day. And the top 5 scams that we're seeing reported, number 1 would be identity theft. Number 2, people are reporting government imposter scams, as you mentioned, business imposter scams. We also are seeing fraudulent sales reported. Tech support scams has been around forever, is still super popular. And then romance scams.
All right, next question is for Paul and Chris. How have fraud schemes evolved in recent years, especially with the rise of digital technologies?
Yes, in fact, we had that comment earlier today about, well, before the advent of the emails and cell phones, how did fraudsters do their tricks. And often it was face-to-face in the marketplace, in the street. But nowadays, unfortunately, because of we were all connected through the internet, these fraudsters can act very much with anonymity. So it can take one word on a cell phone, hi. That's all it takes for the fraudster to begin a conversation with the victim, to the point where the victim then responds and they start a communication, and it ends up with the victim inquiring as to the lifestyle of the suspect who lives in Beverly Hills. How did you do that? Or I shouldn't be telling you this, but my uncle showed me a wonderful way through crypto investment. And that's how these scams unfortunately unfold. So we're seeing a lot of text through cell phones. A lot of scams start there through emails. I get those bogus emails every day. Do you get them from the Geek Squad? Right? You got them from the Geek Squad, telling you that you've just purchased another year's subscription, and if you didn't, call this number. It happens all the time. Because I'm 72, I get calls every day on my landline, and I know a younger audience says, excuse me, what's a landline? It's very useful, actually, a landline, except the scammers will call me every single day regarding my Medicare card or the medical equipment that I need for my bad knees or whatever. So they love the phone, they love the internet, they love the anonymity of it all. And then I'll let Chris probably talk about artificial intelligence and everything else.
No, I would reiterate the electronics and emails. All your information is online. It's all open, all public information, all able to look you up, your kids up, grandkids, and so that's how they find that information about you and be able to use that information in the scam against you. The grandparent scam is a big one that they use against the elders, as well as other types of scams where they will pull up your full information, address, phone number, send you an email and tell you, supply a QR code and say, okay, scan this QR code, and once you do that, you're hooked into their system, and then they force you to pay an X amount of dollars to release that information that they claim they have on you, which may not or may not be true. I get phone calls from my mother all the time. Law enforcement is going to arrest me if I don't pay this. That's not true. They will not call you, so I have to explain that to her all the time.
So you're saying, Chris, that law enforcement will actually show up at your door and not call you before they arrest you? Is that? Okay, I just want to be clear. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Susan and Paul, I'm going to ask this next question to the two of you. And Paul, you just mentioned briefly AI. So would you speak to artificial intelligence as I ask this question too, just to kind of give folks... Actually, before I ask the next question, would you just kind of speak to what are some things folks should be aware of as artificial intelligence becomes more prevalent?
Yes. I don't know whether any of you has anybody ever used something called Chat GPT? It's frightening. My son got married on June the 1st, and I went on to Chat GPT about a week before in order to see if I could create some kind of poem. And all I had to write in was my son's name, his fiance's name, where they met on the tennis court in San Francisco, and I hit a button, and 30 seconds later, I get 5 stanzas of a brilliant, accurate poem that anybody would not be ashamed to read out at a wedding reception. That's the power of artificial intelligence. It can take anything and convert it within seconds into something credible, reasonable, logical, and applies to your life. And that's what these scammers are using in so many ways, not just software such as Chat GPT, but they're doing it with faces of videos. I could show you now a Tom Cruise video, but it's not Tom Cruise. It's the software that is used to make it look like Tom Cruise telling you to buy this amazing piece of land in southern Mexico. And so we are going to see more of this. You're going to see more and more phone calls coming in, and you absolutely think it is your granddaughter who is stuck somewhere in another part of the world and she needs to be helped. So, and you're convinced it's her, but it's not her. And so, and we've just in a year, we've seen the advances that the criminals are doing with artificial intelligence. So it makes me even more skeptical. You know, I used to just teach my kids that when the doorbell rings, it's a crook. That was the rule. I said, doorbell right? Okay, don't answer it, it's a crook. But now I have to tell myself when the phone rings, when an email comes in, when I see a video attachment, it's all fake. And unless I'm convinced otherwise, it's all going to be fake. Because that's the power that artificial intelligence has. Now, I'm not trying to scare you.
You did.
Thank you. But it is reality for me that artificial intelligence, there's going to be some wonderful uses for it. But unfortunately, the crooks think it's the best thing they've ever seen.
So along with that, Susan and Paul, Susan, I'll have you answer this next question. Even with artificial intelligence, there's going to be early warning signs that something's fraud. Susan, could you speak to maybe how the average person might wake up to fraud happening to them, and how they could maybe keep an eye out for it in their own life?
Well, I think I alluded to that when I was talking about if someone calls and says that your name is being used as a money laundering or whatever, to check your credit reports. And be very suspicious of everybody that calls you. Amazon, you know, I never answer the phone now unless I know who it is. I figure if it's somebody that wants to leave me a message, they'll leave me a message and I'll call them back. And I block it. I don't have anything more to do with whoever that person is that calls. So I may miss calls, but those are the things that I do to try and prevent. And I tell people all the time, just, you know, don't answer if you don't know. Don't say hi.
That's right, Susan. Paul, any other just basic steps folks can take to make sure they are aware if fraud is happening to them?
Sure. I think one of the biggest red flags that Susan talked about in her story is that if somebody tells you not to say anything to anybody else, that is the biggest red flag. Always question anything that comes through, either through a mail, text, or a phone call. And if you don't know the person, don't answer it. If somebody's calling you and say we're doing a survey, tell them to mind their own business. Okay. Don't engage in anything that will give the scammers an opportunity to know more about you or your movements. And when you do take your next vacation, please don't post your photographs of you online, because then the scammers will know you're out of town, and who knows. How many of us use nextdoor.com? A few of us do.
It's not as popular in Montana.
Okay. I use it. It's a great neighborhood watch website, but I'm shocked at the number of people in my local vicinity who put online, hey, anybody out there can look after my 92-year-old mother while I'm at work for 3 days a week from 2:30 to 6:30 in the evening. I just find that just so incredible. So again, always go through the proper channels before you want to hire anybody, licensed contractors or caregivers or whoever it is.
Thanks, Paul. Jessica and Brett, for you again here. Can you speak to some proactive steps individuals might take to safeguard their personal information and financial assets?
Yeah, so I can start. I think we've kind of been talking about this, but the number one thing we can do is don't answer your phone. And I hate saying that because I know so many of us want to, but it's really important because a lot of these scams originate through the phone, and if we're not answering it, we're not opening that door. So if you have a cell phone, most cell phones have a way that you can send unknown phone numbers directly to voicemail. This has helped me tremendously because I was getting probably 15 scam calls a day, and it's disruptive and it's frustrating. And if it's somebody important, they'll leave you a message. It still has that ability, and you can call them back. So that's something to consider. Weak passwords are better to blame for about 80% of breaches. And so having strong, unique passwords for all of your accounts is important. Consider, is this one work? Okay. Consider using a password manager, which helps you kind of create those really unique passwords and stores them in one place. They're largely considered safe, especially if you're not using strong passwords to begin with. Another thing we encourage people to do is use multi-factor authentication. And so this is on your accounts. So in addition to a password or biometrics like a thumbprint that you have to access something, it'll also send you a one-time code.
I'm sorry, Jessica. We had microphone problems for Jessica earlier, so we apologize.
So that's something to consider. And then something Susan was really talking about is your credit reports, monitoring your credit reports and freezing your credits. It's super easy to do. You can unfreeze your credit, and what it's going to do is block people from being able to open up accounts under your name without you knowing about it, or at least help prevent that. So definitely consider those steps.
Ditto.
Sorry.
That was everything I was going to talk about.
And Brent, can you really speak from a financial institution standpoint on that question?
You betcha. But one thing I want to, a few people have mentioned this, and just want to take it a step further. You know, this notion about not picking up the phone, not talking to people. Something that I want to go a step further is when they leave you that message that says, hey, I'm calling from MasterCard and there's fraud on your account and we need you to call us right back at 1-800-IAMAScammer.com, right? Don't use that phone number. Please don't use that phone number. If you get an email that says, hey, this is PayPal and you've got unusual transactions, click here. For the love of God, don't click here. Please, okay? Nothing good will happen from clicking those links. What you want to do is take a step back and go to your credit card itself, right? I've got a MasterCard. There is a phone number on the back of my MasterCard. That's the number that I want to call. Not what came in an email, not what was left in a voicemail. And ditto that to everything. Any email you get that says click here or call here or any of that stuff, just stop, okay? Don't. If you've got a PayPal account, go pull that PayPal account up, right? Because what a lot of times they'll say is, hey, you got this pending charge from PayPal, and click here if you didn't authorize this charge, right? Well, I have PayPal. It's very easy for me to go on my phone and pull up my PayPal and see, do I have a pending charge on there? If I don't, well, I know this was a scam, right? So I don't have to go any further at that point. If I want to call PayPal, I can, but checking, same thing with the credit card. They say you've got a pending charge at Best Buy for $8,000, right? Pull up your credit card statement. Do you have a pending charge at Best Buy? If you don't, obviously you know that there's a problem, all right? So there's things like that. Some other ways to protect yourself is, I think you have to start with the understanding, and I think Chris alluded to this, your information is out there, okay? It is out there, and you can't get rid of it. I have seen all kinds of advertisements for companies that say, hey, pay us $500 and we can scrub all of your personal information from the internet. I'm going to just say that that's a scam. Okay? I haven't really personally researched that one, but you are not going to get your information off the internet. So if you start with that point of knowing your information is out there, then you can take some steps to, okay, how can I not make it worse? Right? Something we love to do, and this was commented, you get on Facebook. What was something that was really popular? I haven't seen it in a while, but it used to be super popular. Send your buddy a quiz. What's your favorite color? What was your favorite vacation spot? What's your favorite car? What are all these things? Well, what's the problem with that? What do we tend to do? We use that stuff with like banking, right? At our bank, you've got to have at least, I think it's 3 security questions on file so we can verify who you are. Well, what do people tend to use for those security questions, right? What's my favorite vacation spot? What's my dog's name? All that stuff that you just put on Facebook for anybody that pulls up a Facebook page to look at, right? So don't make it worse by putting that information out there. The other comment was made. Don't put that, hey, we'll see you guys later. I'm going to be in Ireland for the next 6 months. Well, I just invited any burglar anywhere near my neighborhood to come break into my house, right? So I think things like that, knowing what information's out there, not adding to it, again, password protection is huge. If you use Bob123 as your password, you're going to get hacked. Okay? You're just going to get hacked. I have used a password protection service for a very long time because I use very large, complicated passwords that I'm never going to remember, right? What's the one password I have to remember? To my password keeper, right? But once I can get into my password keeper, which, as was mentioned, I also use multi-factor authentication. So I'm an iPhone user, so I use facial recognition. And then it also sends me a code to an authenticator that I have to enter before I can get into my password service. Right? So I feel pretty comfortable with my password and my ability to get into there. The nice thing is once I'm into my password service, I can just click copy, and then I can paste that into whatever service that I'm trying to log into. So I don't have to remember the 18-digit code that I need, right? So I'm a big fan of those services. Please use the reputable ones. If you go out there and find some, Acme Security, and hey, we'll protect your passwords for $1 every 6 months. Yeah, you got a problem, right? These things do cost some money. They're not outrageously expensive, but I think they are gold. So I think those.
That's great.
Yeah, I think we'll get into some.
We'll come back to you. I promise. You'll get to say more. So, our next question is for Chris. Chris, you're seeing financial crime. So Chris is investigating financial crimes across Montana. And so, Chris, I want to just ask, what kind of scams are you seeing, especially in rural parts of the state right now?
Rurally, we've dealt with the Publishers Clearinghouse scam. That is one of them that's been going around quite a bit.
Typically exploitations by family.
Yeah, typically that's what it is exploitation.
So family exploitation primarily.
Yeah, pretty much family exploitation. Okay. Publishers Clearinghouse was pretty elaborate, one that we dealt with recently. $8.5 million Mercedes SUV and $7,000 for every week for the remainder of your life. That's a pretty good incentive to start sending some money to pay for the taxes. They will not ask you to pay for the taxes up front, but that's one thing to remember.
Government doesn't like to ask for money up front usually. It's after the fact, right, Britt?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Chris,
yeah.
Talk about how persistent people are in their belief that it's real.
Yeah.
That is very true. It is a very tough road to hoe to try to get somebody to believe that grasp of money is not exactly true. When they look at, I'm going to spend $10,000 for $8.5 million, that isn't a very good drop in the bucket to say that it isn't true. And so you're trying to convince them that this scam that they are involved in is not real. And that pull of money is just so great on what they feel they can do for their family, for their life, their grandchildren, and everything else. And it took, in one instance that I was working, it took close to a month to try to convince this individual that that money was not real, the SUV was not waiting for them, and the rest of the money wasn't going to be there. And they were just so convinced that it was. And to the fact that the scammer had used the same individual's name that is listed on the website and got all that information off Publishers Clearing website and said that they were who in fact they were. But they wouldn't believe that it was any different.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Susan and Paul, this next question's for you. What role can family members play, particularly those caring for older adults, in preventing fraud targeting their loved ones?
Great question, and I get asked that a lot by adult children when they hear me talk about some of their parents who have been victims. One of the things I've always told adult children is this: if they suspect that a family, one of their parents, particularly one who's just lost their life partner and they're alone, it could be susceptible to being exploited financially in a fraud or a scam. This is what I tell the adult child: write a letter. A lot of people go, what's a letter? I don't know, because we've lost that art, have we not? I say, write a letter to your mother's bank or credit union manager and say, dear sir or madam, my mother has been with you for 72 years. Even though your bank has changed hands 17 times, my mother has been consistently a loyal customer to you. I'm letting you know that I'm concerned about my mother's accounts. I believe that she may become a victim of some kind of fraud or scam in the future. Therefore, I'm asking you, in reflection of her loyalty to you, to keep a special eye on my mother's account. And if you see any variation of a deviation of her normal banking practice, I want you to immediately call Adult Protective Services and with your concerns. Now, the reason I'm saying that is, number one, if as an adult child, if you try to speak to your mother's bank manager, they won't talk to you, and that's appropriate. But if you write a letter, and I've learned this as a prosecutor over 25 years, when a victim writes a letter, it's there. You have to deal with it. You must deal with it, and it's there. And particularly in California, we've seen a lot more banks being sued civilly by adult children when they believe that their mother or father has their life savings has been negligently allowed to evaporate by the bank or the credit union. Another tip I always tell adult children is lock up your mother's jewelry. I've prosecuted hundreds of cases of jewelry being stolen. It's stolen by an addicted son who's addicted to gambling, drugs, or alcohol. It's stolen by the caregiver who was hired without a background check. It's stolen by the carpet cleaner. I had one case, I prosecuted the carpet cleaner. He walked into the bedroom with his high-power vacuum and sucked the jewelry down the pipe. Lock it up because the termite fumigator. Do you get termites in Montana? No. Okay, we get them all the time in San Diego. Anyway, they come in there, they put a tent over your house, and then they walk in your house and they steal your jewelry. So that's another thing. A third thing I always tell adult children is make sure that your mother and father does freeze their credit, especially because they're not going to need another car or whatever. And then the fifth thing I say to them is do something about your parents' unlocked mailbox. That was one of the biggest culture shocks for me coming from the UK to Southern California. I had never, ever seen a mailbox on a street before. And I was 39 at the time when I first saw my first mailbox on the street. And I literally, when we went to buy our first house in San Diego, I started playing with a flap. And I said to my wife, what's this? She said, well, that's the mailbox. I said, what does that do? She said, well, that's where our mail's going to go. I said, you're kidding me. While I'm downtown prosecuting the local thief, my other local thief is up here stealing my mail out of my unlocked mailbox. That's not going to happen. We have so much mailbox theft in this country. And then there's so much check washing, which is being done because the checks are being stolen out of the unlocked mailboxes. I would never allow any of my family to have an unlocked mailbox. So that's something else that I always tell adult children, do something about that.
Susan, I'm actually going to have you just answer, as a victim of fraud, what would have been helpful from your friends or family to help interrupt that pattern?
Well, I think talking to them and not getting, following the instruction of don't tell anyone. I think had I said something to somebody, that maybe I would have kind of been putting things together and going, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. I think that's one of the disadvantages of being single is that you don't have anyone to kind of, take the information and does this make sense? And particularly when you were so terrified that, you couldn't talk to anybody. I don't know how they find us single older women. Is there a website out there that says, here, get this person, she's vulnerable? So, yeah, I just think, talking to my son, my brother, would have made a difference.
And Jessica, for you, the same question in this area. Just what are things people, family can do, and even community organizations can do to help kind of push and get support to victims sooner?
Yeah, so to your point, Susan, a lot of people don't feel comfortable talking to their children. They're worried that it's going to perceive as, they can't take care of their finances anymore or a loss of independence. And so that's something to be cognizant of with family members. We always say, try to understand the intent of your parents. Maybe I need a breath. So try to understand the intent behind it. And we often encourage people to say, listen, Mom, it's okay if you don't want to talk to me, but maybe you can talk to your clergy, or we can talk to a family friend, or we can talk to the AARP helpline. So encouraging people to seek out support is important.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. I appreciate it. So, Chris and Brett, this question's for you. What are the most important steps to take if someone believes they're a victim of fraud?
Well, I think something that's been mentioned here a lot is you've got to talk to someone. You just have to. And there's really no other simple way to say that, because the shame is there, the guilt is there, all of those things are there, and those are real and those are powerful. But if you can take a step back and think about, who should I be able to talk to, right? Should I be able to talk to my banker? You should be able to talk to your banker. You would be surprised how many people I have sat on the phone with for hours, and they have lied and lied and lied and lied to me, furthering the story that the criminal had told them they needed to set, that they needed to tell their banker, right? And they have all these reasons, right? They're like, oh, your bank is corrupt, and you can't listen to your banker because we're trying to protect you from your banker, too. Does that really make sense? Does that really make sense? I mean, if this supposed federal agent was investigating my bank and me, saying that I'm a corrupt employee, wouldn't they go deal with that, right? They wouldn't just let this thing go on and on and on and on, right? And say, oh, you got to go to your bank and lie to them, right? Same thing with law enforcement. I was a detective for 15 years working financial crimes, and I went to, I can't tell you how many homes, along with an APS worker, to try and talk to somebody that's been caught up in a scam, and they would continue that story that the scammer told them that they need to perpetuate. So I think taking that pause, and saying, who in my life should I be able to trust? And then reaching out to those people. And it can be gut-wrenching, and it can be horrible. But it is a step that has to be taken. And then for us, there are those friends and family, like it's been talked about. Work on your dialogue. Don't make them feel guilty. Don't say, how could you get caught up in that, right? And I've had some 4-letter conversations with some family members that have done that. That have just absolutely beaten up their poor parent, figuratively speaking, over a financial scam. And no, cannot do that, right? So we've got to work really hard, on the message. The dialogue, how we approach people, so that they do feel empowered to reach out and talk. Because that's really the only way that we're going to get ahead of this thing. Is we've got to have people talk, and hopefully the sooner the better, right? Because the longer you wait, that's one of the challenges in law enforcement we haven't really touched a lot on, but in this digital age, money moves in the blink of an eye, right? And I mean, when I was a detective, by the time I would get a report that something had happened, well, that could be 2, 3, 4 weeks after the event happened. Well, if I do a subpoena to the bank account that the money was sent to, is that money still there? No. Scammers are waiting. Because that's part of the scams. They always want you to tell them, right? You gotta let us know as soon as you wired that money. We gotta know the minute you wired that money. Yeah, because they gotta know that account, right? And I had worked cases where we would serve 3, 4, 5 subpoenas, chasing banks all across the country, and unfortunately, what do we find out at the end of the line? It either left in cash, and now we can't trace it, or it went overseas, and then we had all kinds of problems, right? So that the sooner we find out, in banks, we can try and recall wires. We can try and cancel cashier's checks. But if we don't know about that right away, that money is gone.
Great. Chris, can you also speak to who we need to let know about when we've been victims of fraud too?
In the law enforcement side of it, yes. First thing you should do is contact your local APS, contact your local law enforcement. If you believe you've gotten something that is what you believe to be a scam, email or phone call, notify local law enforcement, APS, what it is. And as well as AARP has the fraud hotline, you can put that on contact. Federal has IC3.com that you can report to either through
.gov.
IC3.gov. To do that electronically, or they have a phone number I believe you can contact and talk to somebody to report without having to log in. But those are some aspects you should be contacting. And then we're also available for a phone call and take that information as well.
Great, thanks, Chris. And if there are folks in the room who are with agencies too, to remind you that it's important, even if you're not sure to get that reported, but you also can report to IC3 to get those things rolling, because agencies are putting these cases together now as they watch different trails, and so it's important to report all of it. So I want to give a second for our audience to ask any questions if they have any. Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
When should you freeze your credit card account, and what does it do when you freeze it? I mean, I'm not going to buy a car or anything now, but I just want to know when I should freeze it and why, or what it does.
They'll leave the mic back. It's really running.
I was going to sit down and
Well, you can do a credit freeze anytime you want. And it's very simple these days. It used to be a lot more complicated, but you can log on. There's 3 credit reporting agencies: Experian, TransUnion, Equifax.
You just have to log on to one of them, or can you log on to all 3?
What I have been told is that if you report to one, it is supposed to get to all of the others. I wouldn't bank on that. Okay. All of them have an online process that you can do the credit freeze on. If you do it with all 3 of them, you know that it's there. So they're supposed to report to each other. I wouldn't trust that. Doing it is very easy. I can tell you I was a potential scam victim here very recently. I get this notice from the state of Montana saying that they were processing my unemployment insurance claim that I had filed. I had filed no such uninsurance claim, and I even texted my supervisor and said, do I need to know something? Do I still have a job? I had worked that, and I knew as soon as I looked at it, because I'd actually worked that exact same scam when I was a detective, and these organized crime rings will literally send out fraudulent unemployment insurance claims all over the country and try and get money sent to them. So I wasn't sure what of my information had been compromised, but they obviously had enough to file a claim with the state in my name. So I went to all 3 of them and I did the credit freeze. It is very easy to remove the freeze. You just get back online. You'll generally have a code that you're supposed to have printed and kept. The one thing I will tell you is it's going to take, depending on the agency and depending on when you're trying to thaw your credit, it can take 24 to 48 hours. So if you're about to go buy a car, you need to pre-plan, right, if you've done a credit freeze. But most of them can get that credit unlocked in 24 hours or less.
Okay. If you only do that if you feel like you were scammed, or, I mean, when should I Freeze it and do it all the time?
You can do.
Dennis, I wanna go buy something?
You can do it absolutely anytime. You don't have to wait. They don't really ask a reason. You can just get on there and freeze that credit. And I think the other thing that was mentioned, you can also through, there's a couple places you can get a free credit report, and you can get a free credit report from each one of the credit agencies. So if you're smart, what you do is you get one from Equifax, and you wait about 4 or 5 months, and then you get the one from TransUnion, and then you get the one, right? So you can space it out, and you can get, you can do it quarterly and check your credit 3 times a year if you like. So very important to do all of those. Did that catch everything you needed?
Yeah, I just wondered why I should freeze it, but it looks to me like with all the scams going on, I should just freeze it.
Well, that way, if anybody gets your information, I can. If I steal your mail, like Paul is out there doing, right? Those English, you gotta watch him. So, but if I steal your mail and I've got all of your identifying information, and I walk down the street and I want to apply for a Bank of America credit card, right? When they go to run the credit, it's going to be frozen. I won't be able to do that.
Good.
So it's going to stop anybody from opening a line of credit in your name.
And Brett, I'll actually add to your piece really quick. I had the same scam happen to me with the unemployment claim.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do every time I pay my bills now is I check my credit. So when I'm paying my bills each month, I just look on the online credit services and make sure nothing's weird going on there. And it's probably something we all should just get in the habit of doing when we do our finances. So,
yep.
Yeah.
You can put it, if you do put the freeze on.
Yep.
I'm not fast, but I'm reliable.
This is just from my own experience.
Yep.
If you do place a freeze on your credit for all 3, and if, let's say you want to get a loan or something like that, you can lift it temporarily. You could set the time limit on how long you want that to be lifted. So if you just want it 1 day, you can just say 1 day, and then it'll just go back to freeze right after that. So that's, a lot of people don't, they hesitate to put the freeze on because then they're afraid they wouldn't be able to get a loan or whatever. But it's really easy. You can do it on your phone,
Great.
of course.
Great. Of course, we can do it all on our phone, right?
Exactly.
And it won't affect your ability to use your credit cards.
Right.
It's only opening a new credit account.
Gotcha.
Oh, good, okay.
The other thing you can do is freeze your minor children's credit. I have 3 younger children. I did it for all 3 of their credits, so then nobody can open accounts in their names either.
Thank you.
Yes, who is the most vulnerable are little kids because it's 18 years before they're opening a legitimate account.
I have 2 questions, please. I'm helping my mom. She just recently fell victim. Number 1, do y'all know, is there anybody in Billings that's really tech savvy? Because we are pretty confident her phone has been compromised. So I've tried a few and they don't seem to have that expertise. I'm just looking for a resource like that, or we're just gonna buy a new phone
I do
and switch.
factory reset.
Okay, I have one little problem with that one, but I'll talk to you after. And then the second thing is, she lived in Virginia. She's here visiting with us now while we're trying to work through that. But she fell for the Publishers Clearinghouse one, and they were almost getting threatening, sending pictures of the outside of her
Yep.
house. And in your experience, are they local? Should she be concerned about her physical safety, or are they in Nigeria or somewhere making these threats over the internet?
So to the phone conversation, I recommend most of the time when people come to our office that they do think about getting a new phone, because that's an easy way. But you can transfer the number and then make sure the phone's not compromised.
We're going to change her number because
Yeah.
they're just
So,
calling
Brett,
her.
do you have?
Can I, if I just add a quick one?
Sorry,
When I
Chris.
was a detective, I was a forensic cell phone examiner, so that was kind of my jam there. The new phone is absolutely an option, but if you factory reset your phone, it will completely wipe it. I mean, it is.
If it has a virus that's causing it not to work well, will the factory reset?
Yeah, factory
redo that,
reset
or
absolutely
just like
takes it
data?
back to the original condition of the phone. Those are very, very effective. I can tell you as a forensic examiner, when we would try and get a criminal's phone and he managed to wipe that phone before we got it, I was not recovering that data. It is a thorough wipe. Yes, if you want to take it a step further, getting another phone, but that factory reset is a good option.
Thanks, Brett. That's really helpful. Chris.
I was just going to say, on top of that, it is a pain, but the change in the number. Because what happens with the scammers is they start doing these phone calls out to these numbers to see who will answer it. And as soon as you answer that phone, they know somebody's at that number, and they collect that number, and then that number gets sold to other scammers to start scamming other scams that are going on. So if you answer that phone, they know somebody's there. If you don't answer the phone, they believe it's either a dead number or nobody's using that number. But if you take that time to answer the phone call, say hello, they know somebody's there. And that's what ends up happening with a lot of these scammers. They start collecting these numbers and then start selling them to every other scammers that they have.
Can I just follow up on your mother's getting photographs of her home address? This has just cropped up in the last 3 months. You don't need to worry about it. Just delete it. Don't even open up. Is it coming through an email?
Yes.
Yes. So, and typically what they're saying on these emails is they show your picture of your house from Google Maps, the actual photograph. And then they'll say, we noticed what you've been doing in your private time, and we're willing to not do anything about it if you pay us. And it's typically through cryptocurrency that they want it on Bitcoin. Tell your mother not to worry about it, and for you not to worry about it, they're not local, they've got nothing to do with Virginia or Billings. It's the latest thing.
I had that. I had that one. They used my old address in Minnesota, and I don't no longer live there. But
So they put your old house up, right, Chris? That's great. Any other questions? Yes. We're going to bring the mic to you here.
Hi, Susan. This one's for you. Thank you so much. I've seen you speak wonderful so many times, and it's really impactful every time. But every time I have this question, I never remember to ask you. Did you ever find out how they were tracking your location?
I guess my location on my phone was on.
Sure.
Which I guess you should not have your location available on your phone. But yeah, they tracked me. They knew when I was leaving and where I was going. And it was really scary. It was like, oh, they're up there.
Is there anything we can do as advocates to tell people to do in those kind of situations? Are there apps? What can we do to help folks that are dealing with this, that are having their location tracked?
So I've never visited with Susan, but I would assume somewhere along the line, when you were dealing with this criminal, that they had asked you something about your cell phone provider and your account. Somewhere in there, that was in there. Because do you have an iPhone or an Android? An Android. I'm not as up on Android as I am iPhone. But iPhones, there's a feature called Track My iPhone, and I can share that with anybody that I want, right? So if I want my wife to know where I'm at, I can activate that on her phone so she can look up and see where I'm at any time. So what scammers will do oftentimes is that they will get a person through this dialogue to give them access to that sharing technology. So as far as helping people go, if they think they're being tracked, that's the first thing you want to do is get into that phone and find whatever that tracking software is. It's very easy to turn off. I mean, it's literally on mine. I find the Track My iPhone, I can just turn it off, right? So Android will have a similar feature. So that would be the first thing. They can also install apps. I mean, it depends on how deep this scam and relationship has gone. They can send them links to install software that can make it a lot more difficult. And then again, we're maybe looking at a factory reset type situation. But that's where I would start. I would start with the preloaded stuff, because scammers, yeah, there's some out there that are very sophisticated, but a lot of them, they want to do it as quick and easy as possible. And if I can use something that's existing on that phone, that's a heck of a lot easier than calling you in to install something on your phone. So I would start there. I don't know, Chris, if you've had other tracking.
No, I just seen. Talked about going through I did phone forensics as well, pulling information off of there. Clicking on links may install malware, Trojan horses that go into your phone, stuff that can access your location and that type of thing.
On the reverse angle, I'm a great fan of Apple tags. If you have a suitcase or you're traveling somewhere or you've got something expensive, put one of those $29 Apple tags inside it and you'll be able to find out wherever it is in case somebody steals it. My nephew recently had a wonderful guitar with a case, and he was in a band, and overnight the whole trailer was broken into and all the musical instruments were stolen. And they were all sitting around going, "What can we do?" And he said, "Oh, I got a tag in my guitar case." They busted the hotel room where the crooks were. Not them, but the police did. And recovered all $35,000 worth of instruments thanks to a $29 tag.
Thanks, Paul. Well, I want to thank our panelists. If we can give them a round of applause. And I want to thank all of you for taking time to learn more today, and I thank AARP for helping to sponsor today. We hope you learned a lot. We hope you have some things to take away, and if you have questions, those of us who have been working all day are here to answer them. So hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for coming.